All right, I've been checking the analytics, and there's recently been a big influx of Asian males that keep their hands in their pockets on cruise ships coming to this channel. So I appreciate it if you guys would subscribe there. And thanks all you all. It's a ton of you, and I really appreciate it. I so I'm not even sure how to title this video. I don't know what I'm going to title it quite yet. It's kind of predictions about Starfield, two predictions, but it's also not predictions per se. So I'll get into that. First off is this. When it comes to predictions, and I've talked about this a lot on the channel already, so I'll keep it brief. Well, not a lot, but I've mentioned it at least before. When it comes to predictions, you shouldn't listen to people that make predictions. You really shouldn't. They're almost always wrong. There is a political pundit that makes predictions. That's his thing, it's predictions. And a friend of mine and I used to always make fun of this guy. And his thing was this. No coffee right now. His thing was this. His predictions were things that were very, very obvious to everyone. And those predictions were right about 75% of the time. And then the things that no one could have possibly predicted, he, of course, did not predict, and would explain later why those predictions didn't come true. And it was like, these are not predictions. A prediction is something that, I can predict the sun's going to rise tomorrow. Whoop-de-doo. This unbelievable. And this guy is still considered an authority. When he says what's going to happen in an election or whatever, people still listen to him. And I'm like, do people have that short of memories? All right, anyway. So I'm not going to pretend I'm any better. I would be guessing if I was making a prediction. So I am making two predictions, but one of them I know with 100% certainty is going to be the case, and that's the positive prediction, even if these could even be called predictions. And the other one's negative, but I don't know if this has been addressed or not for Starfield. All right, so here we go. The first prediction. Again, kind of hard to label what these are. It's not exactly that. But so about a year ago, oh, by the way, one last thing, I apologize. When you are trying to make projections about the future, predictions may not work out, but you can look at patterns in the past and say, okay, I'm looking at patterns in the past. For example, I'll give you a good example. How many doomsday scenarios have you lived through? If you're my age, you've had people predict the end of the world. It seems to happen every year. After a while, you just don't care anymore, right? It's like, yeah, right, Mayan calendar, got it. There's been enough of these that you just like, okay, stock up on your water and your food because everybody's getting ready to starve, right? Yeah, I don't listen to most of that. Anyway, but I do look, so and why? Because of patterns. I've been told that my whole life to do these things because we're all going to be in trouble. Past patterns is how I'm looking at this, okay? So the first is this. About a year ago, there was a discussion, and maybe a little bit longer than a year, about the creation engine. And how the creation engine was antiquated and needed to go away and wasn't going to work anymore, wasn't any good. And I remember every time I heard this, and one YouTuber says something, and then they all start saying it. And I remember just sitting there going, this is way off mark. These are people who have no experience playing role-playing games, or no experience playing open world. They can't. They can't possibly have experience playing these games to say that the creation engine is antiquated and out of style. It is anything but. The creation engine, as I know it started with Morrowind. I played Daggerfall, and I don't think Daggerfall had it. I'm almost certain it didn't. Does something that creates more immersion in Bethesda games than any other game by far. And I want to talk, and this cannot be, when I heard, this is confirmed that Bethesda kept the creation engine but enhanced it. That is fantastic news for Starfield. And let me explain why. So let's take Cyberpunk. Now, I'm not picking on Cyberpunk. If you follow me, I love Cyberpunk. I actually think it's a great game, but it's emblematic for other games in the open world genre. If you look at Cyberpunk and you look at when you walk around in the world, how do you know the value of a weapon? How do you know the value of an item? We know the value by the color coding you see when you look down at it. That is immersion breaking. It doesn't look like a real item in the world. How about in Assassin's Creed? What's an item in Assassin's Creed of value? If it's worth $1 or whatever, it's just a little shiny object. You press a button, it tells you the name, which, oh, silver spoon. Maybe a drawing, but you don't see it in the world. How does the creation engine accomplish what it accomplishes without explicitly pointing at an object and saying, this is what it is? Well, like in the real world, you can look at an object in the creation engine and tell whether it's something you're interested in just by looking at it. How did they accomplish this? It's really interesting. The way they did that was they made almost any loose object, almost any object in the world can be picked up. For example, in Assassin's Creed, if you pick up a plate, it's a separate identity. It's probably just it's just a name. You don't really see it. So let's say it's a plate, right? All right, plate goes in your inventory, you sell it, you never even see it. If you see a plate sitting on a shelf, that is an artifact of the engine. It's just an asset just sitting there. It's a graphical asset. You don't touch it, and you know intellectually, you could just see it intuitively that you can't touch it or manipulate it or change it. What's one of the first things that happens in Skyrim? I don't know about you all, but the first Jarl you come across, I took a bowl and put it on his head. Just watched him talk to me with a bowl sitting on his head. So you may go, now this is where this is really interesting, because you may say, well, I mean, what's the big deal about picking up objects that don't have value? I mean, after a while, you never pick them up anymore, and that's true. I mean, you see they don't have value. But they do something better than that. They make everything in the world part of a grander scheme of objects, which means an object that has a value, and you see it, you can pick it up, and you know it's valuable just by seeing it. And so this is one of the issues with a lot of these open world games. It gives you a readout telling you how powerful or valuable it is, or it gives you a color. A purple means it's really valuable. It's really rare and really powerful. And that is something that drives me nuts about open world games. You immediately, as soon as you go into one, as soon as you look at the screen, what you can touch, what you can pick up, what you can't pick up, and you ignore the things you can't pick up, and you move on and that you can't do that in a Bethesda game with the creation engine. You have to actually pay attention, to your environment, and you have to actually look at what you're doing. You have to pay attention to the objects in the world. And that's rare. That's confirmed that's going to be in the next Starfield, and that's great. It's not really a prediction, right? I mean, I'm predicting it, but it's not a prediction. They've already said that this is going to be there, which is really good. That's not to say objects don't get highlighted when you look at them sometimes. That does happen, but still, you have that idea that when you look, you can see differences in objects and be able to manipulate them. Okay, that's the first prediction. The second one, this one's a little more negative. I'm not happy about this. Combat. Combat in Bethesda games is fun. I actually, still to this day, enjoy Skyrim's combat. I have no problem with it. But the truth of the matter is, you can just kind of stand there. You don't really have to think very much. You can look at your stats. You can look at your equipment. It's not very what I would call gamey or puzzly. There's no puzzle. So let me give you an example. So what if you ran across a character who had drones, right? And in order to really get anywhere near the character, you had to deal with the drones. And if you had certain ways in which you had to deal with those drones, it might become interesting how you're going to interact with that character to win the combat. But in a Bethesda game, if there were drones, you can do the same thing as if there weren't drones. You just stand there and shoot. Your movement and your strategies just don't matter very much in these games. And again, this doesn't mean Starfield is going to be bad. It doesn't mean Starfield combat's going to be bad. If you've played Bethesda games, you know what you're getting, right? You know that the combat's a certain way. But I got to tell you, they probably they haven't even addressed this issue. And I have to keep this short as this, again, running long. Sorry. I can't imagine that they've even thought about like, for example, when you move your character in a combat, it doesn't really matter. Cover almost doesn't matter in these games. And it's just sort of like, it's all about the equipment you have and the skills that you have. And that's cool. That's not bad. But I would like the combats to be a little bit more strategic, a little more thoughtful, a little more interesting. And I know the size of the worlds may prohibit something like that. But unfortunately, that's just the way these games are. And I don't know it's something that'll change. You have people, I know it's kind of a meme, but you have people focusing on ladders, whether they can ascend ladders or not. You really care? I'd rather them deal with combat. They have issues with combat in these games. And that's kind of what makes the replayability of them, though, a little bit tough. And I'm predicting, looking at Bethesda's past, this probably has not been fixed. Your combat is probably going to be as pretty milquetoast as it was in the past, unfortunately. And again, that's no reason to be discouraged. I still think the game's going to be great. But consider that even the mods for a lot of these games, if you look at them, when they enhance the combat, they still don't make the combat a little bit more like puzzles. Just one quick example, Wasteland 3. The combat, you really, I think it through. You really got to say, if I send this guy over here and her over there, and I do this and do that, I'm going to have these problems here, and I'm just going to have to take my hits over here, and and hopefully do better over there. And maybe it's because you're just one player, one character most of the time. I'm not sure, but it just seems that in Bethesda games, there's just none of that thought process going on. And again, again, you are only playing one character, and that may be why. But it'd be nice to see them come up with some things that make you have to really think through your actions. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. I don't know that I would call these lock stock predictions, right? I think that you can see why, if you've made it this far in the video, why that's not necessarily the best thing to call these things, but it was the best I could do.